Welcome to Haltech Elite NSP Training Part 79. In this training tutorial, we're going to take a look at working with our basic nitrous control. We have a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check this out. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up and working with our basic nitrous control with our Haltech Elite and our NSP software. Now, nitrous can be an oftentimes confusing topic if you have no experience working with nitrous previous. Now, what we're going to do in this tutorial is really break down some of the fundamentals here, understanding some of the basics between a single fogger versus direct port, wet versus dry, just talking about some of the benefits for each. And then we're going to be also taking a look at how we can set up our Haltech to work with either a wet kit or a dry kit and the programming that we have to go in and configure. It's pretty straightforward, but there are some definite things that I'm going to be outlining here that will save you a lot of headaches and time being able to implement the strategy that I'm going to outline here right off the bat. So let's just jump into the tutorial here. Let's talk about some of these fundamentals. And we're going to move here into our very first pictures coming up on screen. This is going to illustrate the difference between a dry and a wet kit. Now what we're going to find here is that a dry kit is just spraying nitrous only. We do have to offset and add additional fuel flow rate when we have our nitrous coming into our engine. The nitrous will have more oxygen, and we're introducing more oxygen into our engine. We're going to need to offset that with fuel. So we're going to be adding additional fuel through our port fuel injectors, and we can program that all through the Haltech. Now the other example here is our wet kit. That's where we're spraying both fuel and nitrous at the same time through that same jet. And we're going to find in this case, we would not add additional fuel through the Haltech when the nitrous is spraying. This is all taken care of mechanically through the actual jet size. So you'll have in your wet kit example here, a certain jet size that's going to allow a regulated amount of nitrous to spray out of that nozzle and into the engine. If we don't have any jet, we'll have essentially an unlimited amount of nitrous, which could easily blow the engine. We could add as much as 800 to 1,000 more horsepower if we just had something that's unregulated, unjetted. So we want to be specific with this. So we have a jet on the dry kit that will regulate that nitrous flow, and we'll have the same with the wet kit. So there'll be a jet size with the nitrous and a jet size with the fuel. And this is going to allow us to change the jets on the fueling with a wet kit to mechanically get our fuel and nitrous mixture proper. And there's all kinds of online charts you can take a look at. What's going to show you if you have this nitrous jet size, you should have this fuel jet size. I'm not going to go over that because, again, that's kind of separate from programming in terms of the fuel delivery. So we're going to go through setting up both a dry and a wet and how that's going to go, but we should understand what the difference in terminology means now. Now the next picture we're going to take a look at here, this is going to illustrate the difference between the different options that we have. So we have a single fogger and we have a direct port. There's also a plate spray bar, but let's talk about this real quick. So in the previous pictures that we're taking a look at, where we had that nitrous coming into the intake tube, that was known as a single fogger. And that's going to be, the fogger option is going to be spraying that either nitrous or nitrous and fuel mixture into the intake tube, through the throttle body, into the intake manifold, and ultimately into the engine. Now, one thing to note about the single fogger is that it relies on distribution of having an evenly designed intake manifold. So the nitrous is going to follow the natural path of the airflow into the engine. Now, most intake manifolds aren't going to be perfect in terms of flow to each cylinder out of the box. We need to be careful with how large of a shot of nitrous we have using a single fogger option. Typically don't want to run much higher than about a 75 to 100 shot maximum through a single fogger because, again, distribution problems. Each cylinder isn't going to receive the same amount of nitrous, and unless you're running a wideband per cylinder, you really won't be able to dial in and tune your fueling to each cylinder properly. So when you're ready to have a very large shot of nitrous into the engine, we move over to what we find here as a direct port, where we have essentially a single fogger on each runner of the intake manifold. This ensures that each cylinder is going to get the exact same amount of nitrous. And when we're setting up the jet sizes, we want to make sure that they're all the same, so each cylinder is going to be receiving that even distribution of nitrous. Now we can run a direct port in both a wet configuration, as we're going to find here, where we spray both fuel and nitrous at the same time into each cylinder, or we could just have a dry the dry direct port option, which is typically what I use when I'm spraying nitrous. Even if I'm doing a lower shot, I prefer the direct port because, again, distribution is much more even. We don't have to worry about each cylinder potentially being off in terms of what it receives for the nitrous. Now the last option here, this would be a plate spray bar. So if in this case you had a fuel injection retrofit to a carbureted engine, this would be what would go under the manifold, essentially what the injectors are going to have for the retrofit and the carburetor. So it would be the throttle body manifold setup. The plate spray bar would go underneath that, and it would essentially spray into the engine and distribute through the intake manifold into the cylinders. So that is another option. I don't have a whole lot of experience with the plate spray bars, but I do have a ton of experience with the direct port, which is typically my go-to. Even on something like a fuel injection retrofit to a carbureted engine, I will drill and tap each runner on the intake manifold for the nitrous jets and run that direct port configuration. It's just superior in my opinion, especially if you're going after a lot of horsepower. It's just much safer, and you know that each cylinder will be even in terms of what it's receiving for the fuel or for the nitrous mixture, in this case nitrous or fuel. So whether we have a dry kit, whether we have a wet kit, whether it's single fogger or direct port, these terminologies should... Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.